Hey guys, this is King Socrates of the Sandy Point Heritage Society, a non-profit self-help organization aimed at researching, documenting, preserving the history/story of Sandy Point for posterity. Today, as promised, we're presenting another segment of an interview done with Mrs. Sylvia Mills. And for the next 2 episodes, we'll be featuring the following segments of that very same interview. So sit back, relax, and be edified. I've never heard of this. So you as a young teacher, being assigned to a school in Bastia, would have to take the available transportation on that given day going up.
A young teacher or a young student?
A young student.
So a student in high school?
I was a student in high school, but I was a teacher when I had to walk.
So you had family in Bastia who you were staying with?
Yes, my mother had a family friend whom I stayed with during the week and then came back home on Friday evening. Yes.
Wow.
Well, I went to high school. I spent about 5 years. When I went there, I went to the first farm. Very few people went to high school. My farm had how many of us? 12 of us or so in our farm. I got a scholarship, to tell you the truth. I got a scholarship to go to high school. And scholarship in those days, maybe the government would give 2, 3 or 4 scholarships for all the whole island. And there were 12 of us in the farm. I can name them. Some of them, most of them gone to the great beyond now. And we went to school. We had to wear a uniform, and for school, and then for the games uniform, we had to have a uniform for games. We had to pay, if you want to pay to go to school, you had to pay $14.40
Per
term.
term.
And people could not afford to send their children to school. $14.40 was per term.
So the scholarship was really a godsend.
Yes. There was a woman from England. She was a missionary too, Miss Pickard, Miriam Pickard. She came out here and she started this girls' high school. Well, the people who could afford, they sent their children, but there were few. When I went to school, the roll was only 37.
37 students?
37 students. So much so when we got 100 students, we had a party, a big party for these 100 students. As cheap as $14.40 is for us, no. That is what a mother might give a child to buy candy. No.
That would be tied to the salaries that were paid to the various level of employment.
Yes.
And so most of the people who emerged from that profession would have come from what was deemed the poor people.
Poor people. Do you know that when I talked about pupil teachers, the salary of a first-year pupil teacher was 3 shillings. You know what to call a shilling?
I took shilling and pence to the shops, to Mr. Richard's shop over there.
Pound, shilling, and pence.
I did.
You heard about the farthing?
I heard about the farthing.
4 farthings make 1 penny.
We had those tables in school too.
So, 3 shillings. The second year got 5 shillings. The third year got 10 shillings. That was the teacher's pay. The first salary I worked for, when I went, I was what we call 3 pounds. 3 pounds, a pound was 20 shillings.
That was monthly?
Monthly, 3 pounds.
3 pounds.
Then after I got my qualification, I got 5 pounds, and 5 pounds was a lot of money in those days. Could you imagine that why I had to walk? In those days, a bicycle cost $48.
In those days, a bicycle
and I
cost
could
what?
not afford to buy a bicycle.
But you still lived at home, so you had the family support, which was very important, because a young person to branch off on their own then, it was really unheard of.
You couldn't just
because of the societal norms. You couldn't, so you live with your aunt or somebody to help you support. So that was very important. But the education, because Sandy Point has been reputed to be a place where produce a lot of educators. I'm told at one point all the permanent secretaries on St. Kitts came out of Sandy Point. Most of the headmasters of headmistress of schools came out of Sandy Point. So there had to be something about the Mr. Hanley's and the system the emphasis on education in Sandy Point that really resulted in that, or counter for that. What's your opinion on that?
Well, the truth is that, remember I told you that we had the boys' school and the girls' school.
Yes.
But it did not stay there like that. After a time, the school mixed. They mixed the boys and the girls.
Integrated, yes.
And there were 3 schools then. There was an infant, junior, and a senior school. The infant school was housed in the pavilion of the old recreation ground.
I recall going there.
The junior school was at the girls' school, the old girls' school, what we call the Anglican Church Hall.
Quite
and
so.
the boys' school, that was the senior school, was up here at the boys' school. There were 3 schools: infant, senior, junior school. And well, like anything else, Sandy Point, everybody wanted to have a higher education, and you work towards it, right? Remember that there was competition. It was not Sandy Point alone, it was the whole island. For if you want a scholarship, the people are taken from any school from the island.
Once excelled. Once they excelled.
Once you excel. So there was competition, right? And therefore the teachers too, they try to make sure that their school excel.
And their students, yes, because it became reputational.
Reputation.
I recall going to the school that you mentioned at the pavilion, and there was a wooden building just
Yes.
west of it. One of the persons I recall was Miss Buchanan.
Yes.
But I recall Ms. Delaney, those teachers, and I recall at one point there was some, what we call now, kindergarten. Miss Giff, Miss Lucy, had
Yes.
some,
Miss Musson then.
Miss Money then, right across there.
Miss Musson then, yes.
Correct. And there was one farther up in Crab Hill. I won't recall them, but I attended that one at some point. But the Mills family, the Mills name, has been synonymous with education throughout the Federation. And before you go to your children, I would ask you to speak about the contribution of your husband, because a lot is not known about his role in terms of education by the now generation. The Sandy Point High School has been renamed after him about 10 years now, in his honor. And there must be a reason, and it was said that it was because of his contribution. He brought changes to the education system, etc. A lot of people, like myself, didn't quite know that, apart from my migration. And so if you can speak to that, because you're here now to speak about him, his role, the role he played, etc. To whatever extent you want to share with us, please.
My husband is a product of the Sandy Point Boys School under Mr. Hanley.
Beautiful.
From the Sandy Point High School, he went to college in Trinidad. Teachers College. College in Trinidad. He was trained there. When he came back, he was a headmaster of the Sandy Point High School. One of the Sandy Point Boys School. Boys School.
Okay.
Then he was transferred to Bastia. He was at the Bastia Boys School. And afterwards, he became an education officer. They called them inspector of schools.
Okay.
In those days, they were called inspector of schools.
schools.
These inspectors used to go around to the schools. I don't know if you ever, once per year they used to visit the schools and look at the teachers, how they work, and discuss and so forth with the teachers exactly what progress, etc. would happen. That happened in those days. And from inspector of schools, he became an education officer.
Chief Inspector.
Chief Inspector of Schools, sorry. The name then was from Inspector of Schools, he became Chief Inspector of Schools. Then the name was changed to Education Officer, Chief Education Officer.
Do we have that, is that Mr. Hodges' position today, Chief Education Officer?
Yeah.
Okay, because that title,
He's
No.
permanent secretary.
he's a permanent secretary.
Permanent secretary, yeah. He's permanent secretary.
But I think that title still prevails, Chief
does.
Education.
He's the chief education officer still. I don't
Okay.
know who it is right now.
So your husband became the chief education officer. Okay. As I said, not a lot is known about him. He was a quiet person. I
Yes.
call him being tall and quiet, but myself apart. So he is a trained teacher in Trinidad. He came back, he was assigned to the school, and he advanced to be the chief education officer. About what time frame is this?
For the 1970s.
1970s?
Yes, he went off to Jamaica. He went off to London first. He got a scholarship. He did a course in London. So that is where he, yeah?
In the 60s, right?
In the 60s, yes. Went to London University. And there is where he got the idea about this comprehensive school. Where he saw what happened in London, how the children, comprehensive education. That is where he got it, in London.
Compared to what? So what was comprehensive compared to what was happening in St.
Because in St. Kitts, in order to get into school, you had to pay to get high school. High school was, you had to pay to get into, which were the grammar school and the girls' high school. You had to pay to get there. As I told you before, I got a scholarship and I went there. But in London, it was free education. Everybody went. Everybody got a free education after you got to a certain level. And he studied it and looked and see how it worked. And he thought, well, when he come back home here, he'll try it. And that is how he got into it.
So a question about that. So what was it in his experience, right? His own personal experience where he was so attached to the idea of getting free education. What in his experience, what happened to him personally?
Well, he himself wanted the young people, the boys and girls here, to enjoy the same thing as he did, as the children in England. Charlie, what are you referring to with that?
As a pupil teacher,
Oh,
he had to do it multiple times. and
Yes.
What happened?
he was a pupil teacher.
So he was a pupil teacher.
He was a pupil teacher.
And he had to sit the standard 7 several times, right?
Yes.
You mean here or while he was in?
Here.
Yes, because he was qualified as a pupil teacher, but because of his age, he could not go into this higher level because he was so young. So he had to remain as a pupil teacher for these number of years before he was able to qualify as an assistant teacher.
And then after he became an assistant teacher, was he able to go to grammar school himself?
He couldn't afford to go to grammar school.
Okay, I see where Charlie's coming from. Having the qualifications and not being able, up to when he qualified age-wise, he could not
Couldn't
afford
afford
to.
to go to grammar.
So that would have impacted his thought process. Going to the UK and seeing how the students there had that privilege, he studied how we could bring that particular program.
Yes.
So he came back, he petitioned the government, who he spoke to, who's there.
The people who were in the Ministry of Education. In those days, we had the Minister of Education, we had the Permanent Secretary, and they all discussed whether it was feasible. Because you could understand that if you are going to give free secondary education to children, what was the government able to stand the financial burden? So much so that when they started the comprehensive school in Sandy Point, the children were told they have to buy their books because the government could not really. First of all, they had to get qualified teachers, get teachers trained to teach at the high school level, and then after that, there were a lot of things that the school needed. For example, you had to have homework, you had to have, what the other thing is, woodwork, all those things were introduced. And our people, as usual, were not accustomed to pay anything. The very reading books and so, everything was supplied by the government. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the people look to the government, not that they look to the government to supply them everything. Because remember, we grew up in a place where everything in school was given by the government. The books, all you carried to school was your pen and pencil or whatever. And the government supplied everything else. So that when high school education was introduced in Sandy Point, people were not accustomed to pay for anything. And it took them a little time before they understood that they should give their share in helping to educate. I remember attending a teacher's meeting. At that time I had my children going to high school. And a gentleman got up to talk. The Minister of Education, who was Mr. Bryant then, came to speak to the teachers, the parents, at a parent-teachers meeting. And this parent got up and he almost cried because he had about 3 children going to high school. And he found it difficult, he said, to provide them with the books that they needed.
Textbooks.
The textbooks, right. A lot of people, the parents said, I believe they themselves could not afford to pay for the books. The government at that time, they started a system where they started to have some kind of where the government provided a little to those people who could not. We were not accustomed to pay for anything. That is the whole thing. That we were so accustomed to being supplied by government for everything,
yes,
that we took it hard now that you have to pay.
But with the introduction of comprehensive education, that was stated that you no longer had to pay.
No, you had to pay. Free. Everything else was free except you had to buy your books.
And that is gratis to your husband. So when you don't have the information about this thing, you take things for granted. Because I grew up going to school, and of course, because of many families who had people who migrated, you had some subsistence from overseas. And it made a big difference in being able to afford the black and white textbooks then, which was what the standard of the day versus the locals one. I know, that was a tremendous help, but we'll pause for a second. Okay, we're calling again. So I actually took a lot for granted in going to school. As students, as children, you're not taking on those stuff. So it's really good now that we have this information we can share with the wider public. So you would have retired about 1 year. But you taught at different levels. Let's go to that first. You taught at different levels.
Yes, I taught at the infant level. I taught every level of school. And then I taught at high school. Then I went into the teachers training college. Teachers training college. Because you see, our teachers had to go to Antigua, as I told you, to get the teacher training.
Experience, yeah.
Experience. And very few were able to go because they couldn't afford to pay themselves, and government just supplied a sent a few who got scholarships, who they thought would do well.
But at that time that you were teaching there, you didn't have to take a bed with you, right?
Yes, you had to take a bed. You had to take everything with you to St. John, to Antigua.
When you went, but in the latter years when you became a teacher, training yourself, that thing about taking your bed and your cup in your school.
Here in St. Kitts, they started the government when my husband was Chief Education Officer. The minister then was Mr. Bryant, and Mr. Bryant was all for tertiary level education.
Yes.
And then we had a sixth form, and we had at that time the teachers used to they had classes, what they call in-service classes. Every Friday the teachers went to Bastia to have classes before the beginning of the teachers' college. Then from that they started, and then they mixed the sixth form, and when you pass your sixth form, you went at the sixth form and the other teachers, etc. That's what they formed the Teachers Training College. Teachers Training College does not involve not only teachers but sixth form, the people from the high schools.
Okay. And you taught them that setting for how many years?
I taught teaching at the Teachers College. I was responsible for the teaching of reading. How many years? I can't recall. I started in 1970. And I was finished in 1983.
Yeah, because I'm saying, you said 1970, I know you was a teacher who still actively involved many years after.
Yes, because I used to visit the schools. used to visit the schools to help the teachers, apart from their coming to college, to help them actually with the teaching of the subject in the school, to supervise them.
Have you received any distinction for your contribution as an educator from any government?
I got a plaque from one to say that to thank me for my service. I don't want to talk about the other one, to tell you the truth, because it's not a pleasant experience.
Miss Mary, this is your story, you know? This is your story. This is not about not want to say, this is your story.
When the time came for me to retire, you know, you according to the law, you have to tell them that, let them know that your time for retirement is coming.
It's coming, yes.
Well, my birthday was in March, and in December I wrote to them and told them that my time for retirement is, and gave them the date. 3 months notice I gave them.
That's standard.
And when the time came, my birthday was in March, and about 2 weeks before my birthday came, I received a letter from the government thanking me for my service. Thanking me for my service, that it will not be noticed anymore. Well, I know the time had come, and therefore there was no bother. The teacher's exam came up in June, and I had to leave at the end of March. The truth is that at that particular time, was really the time when the teachers were really studying hard and putting things together. And I felt that I would have to help them. So I worked extra hard during that time to see how much I can give them so that they could be able to be prepared. And I was prepared to leave. And I told the teachers that, I'm sorry, I explained to them why I think they should work much harder, because I was leaving at such and such a date. Well, they didn't take it too well, because they wanted me to stay on because of such, etc., etc. But I told them I could not do it because the government had sent to say, wait me to tell me that my time finished.
And your service is no longer needed?
Service was no longer needed. Then one day one of the students came to me and said, Miss Mills, you think if we asked them to let you stay on, you would stay on? And I said to her, no, because they had enough time to think about it, because they should know that your exams come up, and they should have thought of it. And moreover, they had also sent a teacher, someone to the college, who
to replace you?
To replace me. So that means that my place was not needed. So I would try it as much as I could, and I helped the teachers who were then going to sit the exams. And I said goodbye. I was sorry then that I had to leave, because, to tell you the truth,
your teacher
we had and we were making good progress in the teaching of reading, and the teachers realized that too. We were making manuals for the school, we were going ahead. And if that is the government, and they own the schools, if that is what they think of the school, well, I just said goodbye.
As a teacher at heart, anybody take the profession to heart to get that sort of, I won't say reception, but lack of appreciation. It would hurt, I know. But it's your story, it has to be told.
Well, it has happened, and I know, and I always meet with the teachers, and they're always so happy to see me and whatnot, and they always tell me, express their thanks and so forth for helping them at that particular time.
So one other question about your teaching and awards and stuff like that. Did you also, as a teacher or as an educator, did you also go in other places? Like, did you go to Canada or to Guyana?
Yes.
Or where else did you go, and what awards did you get for that?
At that time, there was an organization in Canada who sent out some teachers here to help the government to establish the Teachers College. They sent out men teachers in various areas, and they came here. They used to have workshops every Easter for the teachers, to help the teachers in the various levels, not only in reading, but in English, maths, whatever thing, social studies. They came here and they had workshops for the teachers.
What was the name of the program?
Huh?
What was the name of the program?
What was it? OCOD. OCOD. It was called OCOD Organization. They still used to have it here. I don't remember, but it was, we all referred to it as the OCOD courses. Every Easter they came here and they had a workshop during the vacation for the teachers. Very useful. And I went to Canada, I went to Ottawa, and I stayed there for about 6 weeks and understudied teachers over there, what the program and what they were doing there. We had the University of the West Indies were the examiners for the school, and every year they sent their teachers, their examiners here to examine the Teachers College. And when they came here and saw how well we were doing in English and in maths, in reading and in maths, they invited me to Guyana. I went to Guyana, and I spent, as a teacher, they invited me to Guyana to have workshops in Guyana. I went to Guyana. I had workshop in Guyana. Was well received. I'm satisfied.
Conducted the workshops in Guyana?
In Guyana, and I was happy that I was able to use my knowledge to help other people, and they were so grateful. So, I enjoy my teaching, so I do not let anything marry it. I enjoy, from the time I began to teach until I ended it, I enjoy my life as a teacher.
Something Charlie mentioned a while ago brought back something to my mind. There was a time when we had a number of teachers. I want to believe they were throughout the Federation, but there were at least 4 or 5 here in Sandy Point. They were white teachers. They were called Miss Betty. They were called Mr. Rick Sucker. One of them got married to our lady Mills from the... Was that part of the program?
That was another part. Another part. Yes, I know who you're talking about. I know who you're talking.
Was it Peace Corps?
It was with the Peace Corps.
Okay, I was trying to see if there was a connection with what you mentioned, because we called Miss Betty. She was in like physical education, rock soccer, and quite a few of them.
Yes, they were attached. Yes, they were the Peace Corps, but they were attached. Although they were Peace Corps, they were attached to the ministry. Okay. Because they came to do certain whatever was their their specialty, they were attached to that ministry. Yes, I could remember those people.
But that was a big thing,
Lindy Harris, remember the girl Lindy Harris? She married one of them, yeah.
She taught me there first. Her brother was also a teacher of Tofi Wallace. So we called there was also Mr. Gums. Some of the teachers that we called, there was one called Clayton. Teacher Clayton.
Clayton Heiliger. Clayton was a Heiliger. He was Heiliger's brother. He was a teacher. I know who you're talking about. But he was not one of those who...
No, well, just off the top of my head. But those who came in, that was, I would say, early 70s, thereabouts.
Yeah.
And such. But education has been in your family as educators. You, not only your husband, but you produce at least 2 educators. I recall 2 I went to school with, Sandra and Kali.
Yeah.
They turned out so they get their inspiration from you and your husband. Got a discipline. I mean, the example would have been set by you, so they proud. They follow your footsteps.
I spent a year at Nottingham University in England.
Oh?
I spent a year at Nottingham University in England.
This was around what time? Prior to what?
It was in the 1960s and 1960s. Yeah.
Just before Teachers College.
Yeah. I left my children here to church. How much I put into education, and went abroad on several occasions
to further
my
get your qualifications.
My qualifications, so I can come back
and make a contribution.
Make my contribution. I'm satisfied that I did what I could.
There's a lot of respect for you. I know that. There's a lot of respect for you and your family. So This is an honor for me to be able to speak to you and get a lot of knowledge, which of course I don't have, and to be able to share with a lot of folks. There are a lot of people who are interested in the history of Sandy Point sinkers generally, so this would be a major contribution. Charlie, now you live in the, is it Canada you live? In the US. And you're home now at a time when COVID has restricted travel and different things, but you indicated you're going back shortly?
I am. I came here and I was working from home. I work in software, in computer software. But I came to spend time with my mother. And while at the same time also enjoying some kids. Because I do intend to return, but I will be going back up shortly after about 6 months being here.
You been here that long? 6 months?
Came in early December.
Okay. Well, the thing is just making a contribution in terms of your involvement with the SPBHS. Is that it? Sandy Point?
SPBS. Sandy Point Benevolent Society.
And you're deemed to join our little group here. So it's been challenging. One of the aspects of it is to speak to a person like your mother. When I was here last week, you mentioned that you're 93.
Yes.
93. And I was marveling at your sense of recall. As Charlie said to you, as a teacher, he said to me when I came last week, he said, teachers have that, your brain is actually trained. I'm 6'6", I'm forgetting so much things, but here you are. I want to appreciate it. What is your sense of Sandy Point today as compared to when you were involved in educating? I mean, things have changed, the whole education system. But I don't know if you're tuned to what's happening with Sandy Point. To me, there's been some neglect in terms of I won't say neglect, but there was a sense of pride generally of Sandy Pointers. I know you weren't born in Sandy Point, but you are honorary Sandy Pointer. You've given so much to Sandy Point. Do you have any thoughts on how Sandy Point is today compared to, say, back when you were teaching?
Truth is that most of the things I don't go about much, but I get news from the radio. And from what I hear, the whole of Sandy Point is nothing but politics. I'm telling you.
Well, tell me. Don't I ask you? Because
everything seemed to be so political. I mean, that once ago you had a friend and you didn't know whether the person was this side or the other side. You all just enjoyed one another. Today, politics is preventing you from saying hello to somebody who you know and who was a friend to you before. The whole thing, I don't even want to tell you the truth. It's sad to talk about such things because I'm so accustomed to meeting people and having a good time and whatnot. But now you don't even know what to say. Everything is it's ridiculous.
Sandy Point has changed a lot, of course, and the politics has a lot to do with it. There is also this discussion around 1967, what happened, and I try to bring up that for people who lived it. I speak to Mr. Farray about that. He spoke about his arrest. I speak to other persons and they just gloss over it. It's a story. But I think that was transformational. I recall the Mills. We called his name last week. Rupert. Living down there. He worked in, I'm not sure. Agriculture and such. I recall him coming and tell my brother, Sweet William, Claude Joseph, that his name was on the list to be arrested.
Who?
Claude. Sweet William. So even though they were perceived as being politically, he came and he told him, and so there's a whole lot of mystery about that, what happened, etc. But the politics has been a part of us.
But strange enough to talk about Claude. Claude must have been in politics, but Claude and I were very good friends, yes. We got on very with Paul.
Yeah.
There was no political thing with him.
I don't really respect.
Yes. Yeah.
So there you've had it. The end of that particular interview. We have others upcoming. This has been a production of the Sandy Point Heritage Society. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes. you.